Well, let me try this. Let's see if we get audio now on YouTube. I believe I have audio on TFR. I hope I do. I seem to. I think I do. Geeky, I don't know if you could maybe check that for me even. That would be great. Okay, at least you're getting me on YouTube. Yeah, I still haven't gotten the Skype to work with the OBS Studio side of things. So that's fun. I'm gonna try one more time here to pick it up. Let me see if that comes through. I don't know, how's that coming through? Make sure the mic is live again. All right. So apologize for that delay. Anyway, tonight I want to talk about a few different things. I started off with the equinox. I apologize for the delay. So the equinox is basically 12 hours of light and 12 hours of darkness, and so that sort of represents the beginning of fall. That actually literally starts the beginning of fall. And interestingly enough, we're also in the first quarter of the moon. I just wanted to talk briefly about moon phases a little bit and how that affects plants and how that relates to biodynamic farming. So in general, biodynamic farming has a basic rule set for planting by the moon and taking advantage of the moon's effect on the earth and atmosphere and soil and water and everything. So typically in biodynamic farming, they plant on the new moon, they feed on the waxing moon, that's where the moon is going from new to full, and harvest on the full moon, and then destroy or remove an old crop on the waning side of the moon as we're going back to new moon. Interestingly enough, this year we have 2 full moons in October. That is the blue moon, and so October 1st and October 31st we'll have a full moon. So the beginning and end of October. I wanted to sort of tie into the concept of the moon because I know a lot of people think that the moon, planting by the moon and working with the moon is kind of loony, so to speak. Pardon the pun. But if you consider that the moon has such an effect on tides, and you realize that all plants, animals, and humans, at least here on Earth that we know of, are water-based, and each of us has water in us, it might make a little more sense that it would have an effect on us as well. So I just sort of wanted to touch on that point. And what else? I'm sorry, I'm a little tired tonight. It's been a long day, very long day. So I guess I will go into the next part here. I just wanted to touch on the equinox and the moon and the phases and that sort of thing, and maybe if you haven't considered it from another perspective, to consider it from that perspective. So I mentioned that I had a frost last night, and I've been able to keep tomatoes through frost several years in a row. Last year I actually was able to come through a 28-degree frost with my tomatoes. I had their nutrition and health and energetic level up high enough to raise the plant sap level, the Brix level in the plant sap enough to actually prevent them from freezing down to that temperature. And interestingly enough, my friend Brad from Grow the Farm Up actually made a comment on one of my videos about that recently, and he was talking about 28 degrees being a critical temperature for seed quality for harvesting seed, and he talked about how that affected that. So that video is the September 20th video. on my channel. Let me just pull that up quick, and I will give you the exact title of that video so you can go and check that out and check out his comments on it. I know in the September 21st video I showed his comment, and I think he commented on another video, which was, I believe, the September 20th video, but let me just double check on that. It was September 19th video. Yeah, the September 19th video. Tomatoes, buckwheat, honeybees, and more, I think it is. So you should go check that out if you're interested in learning about how freezing and temperature affects seed quality, especially if you're saving seeds, whether they're grain seeds, tomato seeds, any kind of seed. That is critical, and it has to do with what plant temperatures, plant tissues can withstand temperature-wise. And Brad goes into actually pretty great detail about that in his comment. So at some point, Brad will be on the show as a guest. He has a channel, I think I mentioned this before, but Grow the Farm Up, and he's a regenerative agricultural organic seed breeder and farmer in Nebraska, and he has some really excellent information. Right now he's mid-harvest, and they're drying down a ton of corn seed, and he just did a video the other night showing the drying facility there and the fan that drafts the air into that facility, and it's a massive 14-foot diameter 400 horsepower fan. It's pretty impressive. You should go over and check that out if you're interested in seeing how it's done on a big scale. Thank you, Geeky, for sharing that link. I greatly appreciate it. Let's see. So frost and plant health and foliar feed. So you're probably wondering, how did I get tomato plants to come through 28-degree frost? And so I'm going to go into that, but in accordance with trying to always be real with you, we had a 31-degree temperature here, at least according to the closest station here in Elizaville. Right now my greenhouse Raspberry Pi, which is my data logger and controller, and that also logs outside temperatures as well as managing and controlling stuff in the greenhouse, that is currently down, so I'm unable to log exact temperatures right here on the farm, so I kind of have to go by what the closest station is. So according to that station, it was 31 degrees here last night. I think it was probably a little bit colder than that. We may have gone below 28 degrees or 27 degrees. I know that my plants are in a little bit better nutrition this year because I did a plant sap analysis test last year, and I've adjusted my foliar feed program based on that information. I was unable to go back and do a plant sap analysis test this year to confirm exactly where I'm at. But anyway, I did take damage on my tomatoes last night from frost. It looks like only about the top third of the plants, so I may get some plants surviving. Unfortunately, I had to work very early this morning, and I had a very long day today, and so I was unable to get out there and put another foliar feed down last night to give them a little extra boost and a little extra protection. And I still don't know that that would have helped them anyway. But I want to go back to that seed quality thing, and also frost tolerance, and all of these other pieces all go back to plant health, and it all has to do with trace mineral nutrition in the plant. And later on in this episode, I want to talk about some of the techniques we can use, some of the tools in the toolbox, so to speak, that we can use to help boost plant health and boost that trace mineral nutrition, and in doing so improve the plant's ability to resist disease, pests, drought, fungi, floods, all of these environmental conditions, these extreme environmental conditions that normally really do a lot of damage to plants. If you can get a plant's trace mineral nutrition up, and we'll talk a little bit about how you can practically do that, you can have a tremendous effect on the quality of the plant, the quality of the produce that comes from it, the flavor of that produce, the storage time, the resistance to rotting, down the list of benefits. And in the process, part of that is eliminating chemicals that are negatives on the system, because anytime you put a chemical into the system that has a negative effect on any part of a biological system, whether we acknowledge it or not, you're going to have negative effects on all the other parts, all the other biological parts of the system. Be they major or minor effects, you're still having a negative effect. And you don't want to put negative into the system. What you want to always be doing is seeking better health and nutrition. So a big part of that is some trace minerals like copper, zinc, and manganese especially. These are especially important for seed quality. And I just want to pause and mention another video from Advancing Eco-Agriculture. Again, I know I probably sound like I'm just a walking advertisement for these guys, but they put out some really excellent information. It's more geared at farmers and big scale agriculture, but that doesn't mean that we can't take those concepts and apply them, whether we're on a homestead size, on a market garden size, or even on a small garden size, or even if you're growing in little planters on your balcony or in your kitchen. We can scale these concepts regardless of the scale that we're working in. Along those lines, the video that I'm referring to here is called Unlocking the Potential Yield and Profit of Wheat Growing with David Miller from Advancing Eco-Agriculture. And it's an excellent talk on seed quality. It's more specifically geared at wheat, but the concepts in there all apply to any and all types of seed, especially the grain crops, but for the most part, pretty much any kind of seed. If you can improve the quality of that seed, you're going to improve the vigor of that seed, you're going to improve how well it comes out and grows. And a way for you to maybe visualize and make a little more sense out of this is that if that seed has all that nutrition that it needs right from the start, and it can supply its own nutrition and have the full spectrum of nutrition at the right ratios available to it, then it has that much more ability to come out of dormancy, which is basically, a seed is basically an embryo that's dormant, and so it can come out of that dormancy and sprout and put its root down and put its first leaf set up and start capturing sunlight, and then from there it can start driving that photosynthetic process and go from that little seedling to that giant plant that fruits, flowers, and gives us the food that we're after. One of the things he talks about is how auxins in the plant, and I've talked about auxins in previous episodes before, and I'm sure I will again. Hello, Cameron. Thanks for coming into YouTube. Auxins in the seed determine how much sugar is actually pulled into the seed. Synthesis of auxin, which determines how much carbohydrate moves into the seed. So basically, the hormones in the plant actually help drive how much trace mineral nutrition ends up going into the seed, and that comes back to balanced soils and balanced plant health. So what are the ways that we can achieve this? Well, the biggest effect you can really have is making sure that you have good biology present. If you have good biology present, and I mean good biology and a certain diversity of biology present in and on the seed and in and on your soil at all times, you have a much better opportunity and much better operating system underneath the plants to actually access that trace mineral nutrition. Oftentimes, if you look at a soil test, you'll see that the trace minerals are there, but then if you go and do a sap analysis test in the plants, you'll see that those trace minerals aren't showing up in the plants. And a big part of the reason for that oftentimes is a lack of biology. The biology is sort of the bridge between the trace mineral nutrition that's in the soil and the plants. And that system basically works because plants capture sunlight, and in the process of that, they produce excess sugars. And when they produce excess sugars, they push those sugars down into the soil. That feeds the soil biology. And in feeding that soil biology, they then have the energy that they need to go out and extract that mineral nutrition from the soil and make it available to the plants. And then that cycle continues, and so the more you can amplify that cycle, the more energy you can give those plants, and then the more energy they have, the more excess sugars they can put back in the soil. So it's a self-accelerating system if you can turn it on and get it running. So the number one take-home rule to take out of that is inoculants, 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 inoculants. And I emphasize that for a very important reason, and that's because biology is basically the trump card. You can have all the trace mineral nutrition you want in the soil, and if the plants can't access it, it doesn't mean anything. So inoculants are a great way to make that available. And in the process of this show, Comrades and Farms here on Truth Frequency Radio and also on the Farmacy Seeds Network YouTube channel, I really want to make it easy for people who are listening to the show to go out and find a way to get the pieces that they need to make that possible, make that happen. And so what I'm going to tell you is what I do here and what works for me, and because that's what works for me, I think it'll work for you, and you can find these products as an easy way to get them. Anyway, I'm kind of spiderwebbing here, but the point is, so the inoculants that I use here are BioCoat Gold, which you can get from Advancing Eco Agriculture. I'm sure you can get it from other sources also. Spectrum Extra, which I don't believe they sell the Extra anymore. I think the Spectrum DS is the replacement for that. Basically the same product. I think they've upgraded it a little bit to the DS. That I believe you can only get from Advancing Eco Agriculture. And another one is Biogenesis, and I use those three together. But even when I just use the BioCoat Gold, you would be absolutely amazed. And so to provide an example of that, what I'm going to do is reference a video that I just put up. I believe actually that's the same video, the September 21st video. Let me look. I put up a lot of content recently, so I'm trying to keep track of it. So it'll be the September 21st, 2020 first light frost update. Tomatoes, honeybees, cover crops, and more. And what I'll do here is share a link in the YouTube chat for that. And I just want to pause here for a moment and welcome everyone who came in. So I did say hi to Cameron, but we'll say Cameron, Geeky Gardens, Bomber, Crow Creek Cryptids, Miss Real Dill, Big Rob, and who else? Okay, it looks like that's it for now. And Big Rob, I hope you're healing up, man. I know you were injured pretty badly recently, and I hope you're resting and not in too much pain. And thanks for coming in. And Professor Orange Juice, I did not see you here. Welcome also. So where was I? I was talking about trace mineral nutrition. Can someone remind me where I was? I'm really tired tonight. I was talking about inoculants. Oh, yeah. So go check that video out. And did I drop that in the chat there? I did. And let me drop that over in the TFR chat also. Don't want to leave anybody out over there. And just say hello to Free Energy 13, Rio. I see Geeky Gardens is over there as well. Geeky straddling the dual stream. Very nice. So you should go check that out. And later in that video, maybe about 10 or 11 minutes into the video, if you don't feel like watching the whole video, there is a shot of an area that I planted into cover crops that I have not grown anything in for several years now, and all I did was put seed, a cover crop seed into it, and inoculate it with the BioCoat Gold, the Biogenesis, and the Spectrum Extra. Two other products that I used are biostimulants. They're called PZ1000 and Micro 5000. Those also are available from Advancing Eco Agriculture, and that combination, without any extra nutrition at all, I didn't put any drench nutrition down, I didn't put any foliar feed nutrition down, just that combination, there is a massive difference between the area that was planted and the areas right outside of where that foliar feed was. So that's why I'm encouraging you to go check that video out, because you'll actually be able to see visual results with only inoculants put down, and you'll see that it's a tremendous difference in plant health and vigor. So that's kind of where I was trying to go with that. Let me just see if there's any questions here in the chat. And D Swigger, welcome. Nope. All right. Check in on the old chat of drone free zone in TFR. Oh, that's old chat. Anyway, so I see we're coming up on the break here shortly, so I don't want to get too far into the next segment. Trace mineral nutrition. So one of the other tools we can use in addition to inoculants that is a very powerful tool in the toolbox is foliar feeds, and I actually want to go into foliar feeds a little bit more tonight. I'm gonna do that after we come back from the break, because it's kind of a complex topic and there's a lot of pieces to it. And when I say foliar feeds, often people are confused and they ask me what that is. So I've actually went ahead here and jotted down a few questions that I thought you might ask if you weren't familiar with foliar feeds and how to use them. But they're a very powerful tool, and part of the reason for that is because we can directly address trace mineral deficiencies in plants, and we can do that with a very small amount of material in a very short period of time, which is unlike most of the amendments that we would do in organic farming system or regenerative agriculture systems that we would do through the soil, because those take so much longer to become available to the plants. Not all of them, but many of them. And so in order to be able to have a faster effect on plants and plant health, we use the foliar feeds as a faster way to target that. And we can actually combine those foliar feeds with those inoculants and be putting inoculants in and on the leaf surface, in and on the soil surface, and in and on the soil and the soil structure, so to speak, and at the same time be applying trace mineral nutrition and even macronutrition if necessary in and on the leaf surface. And by combining the two of those, we can make all of those minerals and nutrients much more available to the plant. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more when we get back here. So let me just catch up on chat here. Back by Geeky's back. I'm gonna check in on the vault. Just make sure I'm not missing anybody commenting in the vault or in the Truth Frequency radio stream. So we're coming up on the break here in about 15 seconds. So I will catch you on the other side of the break, and we will jump into foliar feeds, and we'll kind of tear that apart and get into it.
The reviews for Extendivite are amazing. Here are some from Amazon. By Christine, great for heart palpitations. By Anne, before I started using this product, every afternoon my ankles and my hands would be swollen. That doesn't happen anymore. So if that part of their advertising is true, I have to assume that the rest of it is also. Not to mention that when I had my yearly blood test, only a few weeks after beginning to use this product, my cholesterol had dropped over 30 points. I'm going to continue to take it. By Croc, I love this product. It really works. By Brad, works great, thank you. Tell us your story. Get your Extendivite today. To order, call 1-877-928-8822. That's 1-877-928-8822. Or visit heartdrop.com.
talk about something serious for a minute, your age. Getting old has its perks. But remember, being a few years younger, you know, your hair was thicker, you didn't have so many wrinkles, that extra weight wasn't haunting you, and you just felt better. Well, we can't turn back the clocks and go back 10 or 15 years, but you can start feeling and looking 10 or 15 years younger with Nature's Youth RSF. It's a doctor-formulated daily supplement that helps your body maintain its peak performance and fight the aging process. Imagine sleeping better, looking better, and feeling better. See how Nature's Youth RSF has helped thousands of people just like you at nature'syouth.com. nature'syouth.com. Imagine how it will feel when your family and friends are asking you what you did to look so good. Your secret will be Nature's Youth RSF. It's time to start looking better and feeling better. Learn more and order your Nature's Youth RSF at nature'syouth.com. That's nature'syouth.com. That's nature'syouth.com.
Hi, I'm Sergeant Jim Ram, retired. In early 2012, I was facing a lawn movement.
Alrighty, there we go. Just want to make sure I got all my microphones back live here. Welcome back to Comrades and Farms, the Truth Frequency Radio, your protection from deception. Don't forget, you can check out Comrades and Farms also on the Farmacy Seeds Network YouTube channel, or over on Truth Frequency Radio, iHeart, iTunes, and I don't even know where else we're streaming, but several other places. Let's see. So we were talking about foliar feeds when we left off for the break. I did have a question during the break, so I want to address that question before we move along. I had a question from Peter Simon asking about nematode issues. So I'm not sure what the specific issue was, but nematodes can be managed in multiple different ways, oftentimes using cover crops or plants that repel the specific nematodes that you're having trouble with tends to be great. But it does really tie into regenerative agriculture, because part of regenerative agriculture is developing diverse microbial communities, and in developing those diverse microbial communities, you basically infect the soil with good microbes, and that prevents bad microbes from getting in. And in preventing those bad microbes, you now create an environment where even the nematodes don't want to be in that environment. So that's really the core concept of how it works, and basically what you're doing is developing disease suppressive soils. So that is a very very integral and key part of regenerative agriculture in general. And since we're on the topic, and I wanted to talk about foliar feeding, I just want to stop for a moment. And I know I talk about foliar feeding a lot. I kind of rail on it a little bit, and I've come to recognize, as I think about some of my videos and stuff that maybe I talk about it a little too much, and I don't address some of the other tools in the toolbox. So I just want to go back to that and say that foliar feeding is just another tool in the toolbox. However, it is a very powerful tool in the toolbox. And so to sort of demonstrate that point, I wanted to go back and talk about some other tools in the toolbox, just to kind of help broaden this concept out so people can understand it a little bit better and use it as a way to sort of conceptualize this whole thing and put it together in their head a little easier. It's really easy when people talk about regenerative agriculture and some of the soil science behind it for people to get lost in those details, and they end up not picking up the concept because they're trying to understand the details. So to illustrate that, I wrote up a very short list of some of the many tools that are available in the toolbox. And I'm just going to go through this. I wrote up a list of 10. So here are 10 tools that are in our regenerative agricultural toolbox. This is by no means a complete list, and let's just pause and say that actually each of these tools is really not just a tool. Each of these tools is really a set of tools, and there are sub-tools underneath that. So tools in the toolbox. Number 1, inoculants. Oh, and by the way, the first 5 on this list are 1 through 5 on this list because they're very, very powerful tools. And the only reason that foliar feeding isn't one of these top 5 is because I talk about it so darn much. So number 1, inoculants, very key. Number 2, soil trace minerals. That means in the soil, and that has to be combined with good inoculants or good biology so that those trace minerals and that trace mineral nutrition can be exchanged with the digestive tract of the plants, which is really what the root system is. Number 3, biodiversity. Using biodiversity helps build disease-suppressive soils and helps build a greater array of microbial communities, and each of those microbial communities performs its own little unique job in that ecosystem, and through that they're able to exchange and trade energy, nutrients, and other parts of that soil process. Number 4 is cover crops. Cover crops are a really powerful tool and a great way to protect soils, and not just protect them, but actually grow your own mulch in place, unlock trace mineral nutrition, help build and support those microbial communities, and in general improve soil health. And then like if you're in a northern hemisphere on the northern latitudes like I am here at 42 North, I'm zone 5B in Tivoli, New York, and here we get some pretty cold winters, and so most crops won't grow over the winter, but there are crops that will, and those crops can be used to cover and protect those soils, and that gives us another window of opportunity from when we harvest one crop until the following spring when we'll be able to plant another crop. We're actually able to put a crop in between that is sequestering carbon and sunlight, building microbial communities, and building that soil structure up over the winter. And so even on those really cold days when the temperatures come up enough for that crop to grow, they're actually sequestering sunlight and building that soil up. And we can talk about specific cover crops in other episodes. I'm still kind of experimenting and learning with cover crops myself. This is a relatively new thing to me. And let's see. Now, so the rest of this list is really not necessarily in any order of importance, and I'm sure there are probably a few in the beginning of that list that I've missed that might even be more important. But number 6 is tillage, and I'm going to put in parentheses where applicable, because there are soils that need some tillage and some oxidation to help get them going, and there are soils that should not be disturbed, and those soils that should not be disturbed typically are healthier soils, and because they're healthier soils, we don't want to go through with the tiller and basically kill off all those microbes that are doing the work of that soil for us. So let's see, that's tillage. So mulching is number 7 on the list here, and that probably would go significantly above tillage if I had my preference. But mulching and cover crops both are sort of in the same category. Mulching is basically putting dead organic material on the soil to protect it and support microbial communities and provide nutrition to the soil. And cover cropping is like the live version of that, where you're growing cover crops, you're growing mulch, and at the same time you're supporting and maintaining live microbial communities. Another tool in the toolbox is number 8 is irrigation. That is a very powerful and effective tool as well. Number 9, as I mentioned before, is foliar feeding, so I did stick it in this list. Oh, aren't I sneaky? And number 10 is composting. And so you can see why this list is not necessarily in order, and it really depends on what your application is. I just want to pause here for a moment and check in on the chat over at TFR. It looks like there's no new questions or comments over there, and so I'm going to go back to YouTube here and see if I missed anything. For those of you in the YouTube chat, if you use @the Farmacy Seeds Network, the @ sign in the Farmacy Seeds Network, if you have questions, that'll make your questions stand out in orange to me. It'll be a lot easier for me. Chat can often be quite distracting. Bomber says, "Okay, brothers and sisters, the word is here. Foliar feeds. If you hear that, drink." I guess she's playing a drinking game. And it looks like Bell Pepper's checking out. Good night, Bell. Thanks for checking in. Okay, and it looks like Aaron has a question. Oh, you were asking if I'm an arborist. No, I'm not an arborist. I don't hold much in the way of degrees regarding farming or nutrition or agronomy or any of that kind of stuff. But I spent a lot of years studying it and experimenting with it and listening to some really good speakers and trying to learn that information backwards and forwards and share it with other people so we can fix our soils and our land and our health as humans and animals also on this planet. So let's see. So just look back through the chat here. Miss Real Deal says, "Who is taking notes?" You don't have to take notes. You can go back and rewatch it later. Let's see. D. Swigger is having ginger tea with ginger snaps. Oh, very nice. Haven't had ginger snaps in forever. And Professor Orange Juice says that deer is really a dog man. If you're watching on YouTube, I also have a slideshow and a couple other images going along with my my video feed from my camera. Just that way, if people get bored looking at my mug, they have something else interesting to look at. So it looks like oh, we do have a question here. Has the bee situation gotten any better? I guess you're asking about my honeybees or about the bee situation in general. There is a lot of fantastic research and ongoing research and science coming out about honeybees. I just put a video up the other day pointing to another video from a beekeeper, a commercial beekeeper. His name is Ian Stepler, and actually we've already tentatively talked, and he's agreed that to come on the show as a guest, which I'm honored about and very excited about. I'm very much looking forward to talking to Ian. He's super knowledgeable. He's managing between 12 and 1,500 hives up there in Canada. I think he's out in Saskatchewan, and his family farm also does cattle. They also do canola seed and several other grains. And something he's been experimenting with in recent years as he's learned more about bees is that biodiversity that I was talking about. He's experimenting with that more in the form of flowers and plants. For those who don't know, most commercial farmers go through their blocks. They go around all the areas around their blocks, and they use an herbicide or a pesticide, or they mow, or they do something to kill back all the weed seeds that would cause additional weed pressure in their growing fields. And so Ian has stopped doing that as a means of letting the biodiversity and the natural plants in and around those fields and those ditches and those little areas that normally farmers stomp out. He's letting those grow in, and he's finding tremendous benefits for his honeybees and for his honeybee crop, and more importantly, for the health of his honeybee colonies. One of the videos he just did this week was on sunflower pollen and how that improves the health of honeybees, especially regarding a gut infection that honeybees have a tendency to get when their colony health depreciates. It's called nosema. And he pointed to an article, and actually I have that article link in my more recent video. If you go to my channel, there's a video on that, on sunflowers, and then there's a link in that video to that same article. But you should definitely go over and hear Ian talk about it, because Ian relates it to his experiments. He said when he started planting sunflowers later in the season, and those bees were able to access that sunflower pollen just as they go into building that winter nest, he's seen statistically a significant drop in his nosema counts in his colonies, and he has stopped using I forget what it's called. It's I think it's fumic acid, which is typically the commercial application to kill nosema. But again, it comes back to, if you have a good, healthy immune system, you don't get infected with bad biology. And so he's finding that the pollen from those sunflowers is actually helping improve the health of his colonies, and he hasn't seen as much nosema in them, and he hasn't lost them. Now, obviously, we can't say that a correlation is causation, but if we're seeing a large statistical difference, and we've made a change that we know has a scientific basis, it's pretty good evidence supporting the concept. And he said he's going to continue to experiment with it and continue to observe it a little bit closer. And Ian's one of the people that got me to growing a lot more sunflowers. I used to throw a few in here and there because I thought they were pretty, and I just like carrying the seed, and I had some really cool seeds that I got from a breeder friend of mine. But I actually started growing them more, and especially I put in several late plantings this year just for the sole purpose of making them available to both my honeybees and the native pollinators. We also have bumblebees in there, and other bees that I don't even know what species they are, but they're in there and they're grabbing that pollen. And so I can't wait to see how that affects my colonies in the spring, and see if I can notice even a difference in how fast they accelerate and come out in the spring. So I hope that answers the question from Professor Orange Juice. And and I'm just going to catch up on chat again here for a moment. Yeah, so that was, and I'm catching up on Professor Orange Juice's question. He was, in general, slowly dissipating. So let me just circle back around to that. Yes, there are massive losses of honeybee colonies, but if you drill down into that, what we're finding is a lot of those losses are in management that doesn't necessarily fit natural honeybee colonies, right? So Ian was talking about some of the farmers that are they're doing they're commercial honeybee farmers, but they also rent their hives out to commercial agriculture farmers, and so they're moving these colonies from one part of the country way over to another part of the country, a totally different ecological area and environment. And when they do that, they're experiencing tremendous losses. But when Ian talks, he talks about he's more of a stay-in-place beekeeper, and I had to kind of laugh when he said that at first, because I'm a small backyard beekeeper here. I only have 4 hives right now, and I only started beekeeping in the end of 2018. So I have little experience and little size and scale to compare to. But when he said he's a stay-in-place beekeeper, I kind of chuckled, because Ian actually takes his honeybee colonies into a cold storage shed over the winter to keep a nice stable temperature for them, and brings them out in the springtime, and he moves them out to different yards, and he even moves them from yard to yard, based on the different part of the season. One of the ones he just did recently, he had moved them out to move them out to an old wheat field, and I think there were other resources around there that he was letting them access. And I know he was feeding them up at the end of the season with some sugar water through a bulk feeding, to give them so they can backfill that colony, that nest, with as much sugar as they can, so they have good carbohydrates to come through the winter. So let me see. Oh, you're very welcome, Professor Orange Juice. I'm just going to take a look here in chat quick, and I guess I better look at the time. Looks like we got about 8 minutes left before the break. Let's get anything. Oh, Aaron has a question here. I didn't see your question, Aaron. I'm very sorry. It's just hard to keep up with the chat. So I don't know if you could repeat your question, maybe. For some reason, your questions aren't coming through, or I'm missing them. I'm probably just missing them because chat seems to be moving right along tonight, which I'm glad everyone's having a good time chatting. There is no such thing as a dumb question, Aaron. Don't be afraid to ask any question here, and I'm more than happy to talk to any question you have. I'm more than happy to address and go into great detail if I have knowledge on it. And I'll be frank, if I don't have knowledge on it, I'm just going to say I don't know. So you say your grandma told you that all fertilizing has a blood product in it. Just made me curious. No. Now there is a product called blood meal, which is an excellent fertilizer, and it's also a good repellent for deer and many other pests around the garden. But the problem with that is you have to replace it after the rain, because obviously it washes in. And the other thing with that is it's very high in nitrogen, and if you get the biology going correctly in your soil, you should not need to add tremendous amounts of nitrogen to your soil. The air is 78% nitrogen, so if you get the biology going correctly and you get the right species of bacteria, and sometimes you need to use pair plants that are really good with those bacteria, like legumes, you can harvest a tremendous amount of nitrogen out of the air and make it directly available to the plants. So you don't have to do that. What kind of blood products are in the fertilizer that I use? I don't have any blood products in my fertilizers. Most of mine are seaweed and crab shell and rock dust powders, that sort of stuff. They all actually come from Advancing Eco Agriculture. And I know there's a lot of people that do Korean natural farming and a lot of other organic methods. I know people use compost teas. Those are also all excellent tools to have. The reason I go through Advancing Eco Agriculture, I did make a lot of my own homemade teas for a while, but the problem that I found was that I don't have a lab, so I don't have a way to determine exactly what nutrients are available in those products and what they're chelated in and that sort of thing. So when I'm trying to address specific deficiencies, it's very hard for me to gauge what I'm actually addressing using those teas. Now that doesn't mean they don't have value, and it doesn't mean that that's not a great way to bring nutrition and biology into your soils. I just really want to approach it from a very scientific standpoint and make sure that I'm getting those pieces in there that I think I'm getting in there, because it doesn't do us any good to put something on a plant or a crop that we're trying to address a deficiency in, thinking that we have the right thing, and if we don't, and then we don't get the results that we're expecting, we're disappointed and we think that what we're doing doesn't work, when in fact maybe we're just not doing it correctly. So that's why I use those foliar feeds specifically. But no, there are no blood products in anything that I use. Not that I'm opposed to that. I mean, the reality is there's a lot of animals being butchered every day, a lot of people eating those animals, and if some of the byproducts of that can go back and be used on our farms, I think it's great to put that back into the farm system rather than just throw it out. So let me catch up here. So Aaron and anyone else who doesn't know, we're simulcasting on both Truth Frequency Radio at tfrlive.com/listen live, and we're also here on the Farmacy Seeds Network YouTube channel. So we're actually simulcasting. So on my end, that's a lot of hardware and software to keep track of and keep running. And it looks like we've got about 3 minutes left here, so if somebody else has a question here that I can squeeze in on the end, I'm glad to do that. And then when we come back from the break, we'll go into foliar feeding in a little bit more detail, if in fact you have interest in that. And that's right. Thank you, Bomber, to tag me. Use the @Farmacy Seeds Network, and then my question. And if you type @the space, it'll probably bring my name up, at least if you're using a desktop computer. I don't know about the phone side of things. Only grow tomatoes for salsa. Oh, Aaron. Oh, that's okay. I love a good salsa, and I've grown a lot of tomatoes and made a lot of salsa. And actually, I love salsa so much that I started growing garlic, jalapeno peppers. I started trying to make everything, green peppers. I started trying to make everything that goes into my salsa recipe from the farm here. And man, what a tremendous difference in flavor and quality when you do that and you get the trace mineral nutrition right, and you're doing it with really healthy soils and plants. And again, I got to be honest here, as healthy as my stuff is, it's definitely not at peak performance yet. I'm still climbing my way up the scale. And we can actually talk a little bit about the plant health pyramid if you want when we come back. In fact, let me just pull up that information so we can talk about that, because that's a really easy way for people to conceptualize some of the principles that I'm talking about here. And I guess what I'll do is share a link in a minute here, and I'll pull that up after the break. I don't want to miss anybody over here in TFR. Looks like TFR is still fairly quiet, and I'll go back to here in YouTube. And thank you, Bomber. Miss Real Deal asked a question. What was the question? I'm scrolling back through the chat looking for the question. Oh, and I see Cameron asked me a question here. Did the murder hornets go away? I heard they did. I have no idea, Cameron. I haven't kept up on that. Things have just been absolutely insane, crazy busy this year. And then I've started this new TFR show, which is I'm just not used to it yet. I think I found Real Deal's question. What are the best things to grow in a greenhouse in the winter? It depends on where you're at and where your greenhouse is. We could talk about greenhouse and greenhouse related stuff if you want. Aaron says I should put the time in and grow it all. Get off my lazy butt. Well, it is a lot of work. Oh, looks like we're coming to the break here, so we will catch you on the other side.
So why would I want to buy one of these, Mr. Radio Shack Manager?
Why would you want to buy one? Because now everybody's a KO Kolovich now.
All right, we're back from the break here with Carlton Moore, Comrades in Farms, here on Truth Frequency Radio, live streaming, and also on the Farmacy Seeds Network YouTube channel. During the break, I had a couple of questions, so I want to address those briefly, and then we'll jump into foliar feeds a little bit more. I had two questions. One actually relates to foliar feeds, and the other one relates to mole problems. So I'm going to just address the mole problems briefly, and then we'll move on to the foliar feed stuff, since that relates directly to what we're talking about already. Mole problems. I have had mole problems on and off different years. The thing that I found most effective for mole problems is changing the environment, and oftentimes that works for a lot of different things in regenerative agriculture. And let me just elaborate a little bit on that. Like, as far as moles go, take away all the places that moles hide. Moles love to burrow underneath mulches and covers, soil covers, right? So if we remove mulches and we start using cover crops instead of mulches, then that gives us an extra benefit for the soil, and at the same time it actually changes the environment so the moles don't feel safe anymore. So then the hawks and crows and stuff can come in and get them. So that sort of addresses that issue. And I saw another comment in the chat talking about using some sort of a spray. I don't know if that was an organically approved spray or not, but even a lot of the organic sprays are at the end of the day, they're endocrine disruptors. And if you know anything about the endocrine system, it is very sensitive and is a biofeedback system. And so if you disrupt any part of that system, you disrupt many other parts of that system, and that can go downhill very quickly. And I'll just very briefly talk about this. The endocrine system is basically the system that uses hormones, and that's what regulates many of the processes and many of the very subtle and important processes in our bodies, in plants, in animals, and ultimately in soil biology as well. So when we disrupt those hormones communication systems, we've now disrupted how that whole system works. And so just for a real brief example, so you can visualize or conceptualize just how small an amount you need to disrupt them, if you took all of the hormones from all the men on the planet and put it in a pile, you'd have about 70 pounds. And if you did the same thing for all the women on the planet, you'd have about 7 pounds. So I hope maybe this will help you understand just how small an amount that is, and also why we see with all the pesticide applications that we have going in our food supply and plastic exposure and chemical exposure, women seem to have so many more problems in our system. It's because they have a lot less hormone in their system, and consequently it takes a lot less of a hormone change to change their system and problems in it. So I hope that addresses that issue. And then the other question I had was about foliar blends and what sort of foliar blends I use. But first, I just want to dig into foliar feeding a little bit more for those who might not understand what it is or how it works. Moles only come in. Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. So that's why. So Aaron Heisner says moles only come in a yard and gardens with the grubs in the soil, and that makes a lot of sense. I hadn't traced that part of it down. But yeah, if you have grubs, you could change the soil. Again, we're changing the environment and not be spraying pesticides and doing something negative to the system, because remember, that's going to have an effect on all the other biology in that system as well. So you could, Bomber says you could use nematodes, and yes, there are nematodes for certain grubs. In fact, there's I think it's a fungus called milky spore that's used to eliminate Japanese beetles from overwintering and breeding in the soil and coming back the following season. And there are many other applications like that where you can put beneficial nematodes in and beneficial biology in and change that ecosystem without putting a chemical or toxin into the ecosystem that has a negative effect on all of the parts of that system. So we're always looking to improve the health of the system and not interfere or put a negative effect on the system, because those little negative effects we have, often if they're from a pesticide, herbicide, or fungicide, they have very long half-lives and they're very persistent in the soil, and many of them even break down into if not just as toxic compounds, some of them even break down into more toxic compounds. And I've talked about that in other episodes, and I don't want to get too far off into that. So, yeah, and Geeky Garden says local hawk that handles our moles, and that's kind of my approach here too. Hawks and owls, and actually I have some pretty cool owl videos. There's an eastern screech owl that comes in here and hangs out in the barn, and I actually caught him sleeping in here in the barn the one day, and I got some video of him, and I really love seeing those guys around. And so that's another side of this. If we go and start spraying pesticides or chemicals out to kill the moles, and before that mole dies, a hawk or an owl comes along and eats it, now we've killed the owl and the hawk. Now we've taken out the predator that would ordinarily take out the problem. So now we've removed the check and balance in the natural ecosystem, and now you're going to have a population overgrowth. And then with overgrowth, you can have increase of disease, and you end up with a sick system. So that's why we're trying to avoid those negative inputs. To that end, let's get back to foliar feeds a minute. First of all, you might be asking, what is a foliar feed? And I know I talked about that a little bit in the beginning, but since we're going down to the foliar feed topic, I just want to talk about it again. Foliar feeds are where you take a nutrition that a plant needs, and you put it on the plant's leaf surface, and the plant absorbs that nutrition directly through the leaf surface, and in doing so, it's able to absorb it much more quickly and put it to use much more directly. And so what we're looking to do is figure out what the deficiencies are in our plants and address them directly through the foliar feed. And in doing so, we can turn that plant's health around very quickly. So most organic amendments that you would put down in the soil take anywhere between a couple of days, and some of them take up to 30 days or even several months before they take effect. I'll just go for a real simple one, like calcium sulfate. It's also commonly known as gypsum, and that is a very powerful tool, especially like here on my heavy clay soils. That really helps the clay flocculate and kind of open up, and it balances out the magnesium calcium balance in that soil. But it takes about 30 to 45 days for that calcium to be available to, say, a tomato crop in the soil. So I have to put that amendment down 30 to 45 days in advance for it to have the effect on those plants when I want it to. Now, if those plants are deficient in calcium, that means they're waiting for a month to a month and a half before they get the calcium they need. And at that point, they've already done so much cell division and growth in which calcium is needed for every single part of that process that they're basically they're sick plants right from the start. And if you're building a house, you don't put in a crappy foundation and build a big house on it, right? Well, that same concept applies if you're a plant and you're building cell walls and trying to to propagate yourself to the next phase. So that's an example of that. And then if we took, like, say, a foliar spray for calcium, like something like Rebound Calcium from Advanced Agriculture, or even like a Sea Shield, which is a calcium and a nitrogen combination. It's like a crab shell and salmon mix, which excellent tool, by the way. And we put that on the plants in the form of foliar feed. They can absorb that in anywhere between 15 minutes and 48 hours. So inside of 48 hours, those plants can absorb that nutrition and achieve that nutritional balance within the plant, and consequently accelerate that photosynthesis. In doing so, they're producing excess sugars now. When they produce those excess sugars, they're going down into the soil, and they're unlocking those nutrients in the soil. And so now they're making more calcium available from the soil because the plant health is high enough to activate that very quickly. So let me just go back and look at the chat here and make sure I haven't missed any questions. And if I have missed your questions, I'm sorry. Let's see. Oh, you hate the Japanese beetles, Aaron. Yeah, I hate them too. Yeah, get that. Look into milky spore. Put some milky spore in your yard. You can at least eliminate them from hatching in your own yard. Obviously, if they're hatching out of other areas they're areas that you couldn't go and inoculate, then you may have an incoming problem, but at least you won't have the problem sourcing right from where you're at. Uh, Lawnmower vibration. Yeah, Geeky says lawnmower vibration scares the moles to the surface, and hawk swoops down. Yeah, I see them scatter when I go through with the mower. If I've let things grow a little too thick, boy, they take off quick. And that's another point about that. Changing the environment. You keep it mowed a little bit shorter. Now they don't have a place to hide from the hawks, the coyotes, all the other predators that would come in and eat them. Yes, Bomber, I just said foliar again, so drink. I guess Bomber's drinking. Ding ding, foliar. Anyway, let me go back and just check on TFR chat here. Looks like I haven't missed any comments over there. That's good. So, you literally picked them every day in a gallon bucket with a little soap, about 200 a day all July. Wow, that's a huge pest pressure. And let me ask, what are they coming on to? Are they on raspberries or some other plant? I know that's the one that I did notice them coming on. So here's a really cool thing about that. I put my raspberries, I have Nova raspberries here that I actually got 3 plants from a friend like 3 or 4 years ago. And I planted them out here with the intent to propagate them, and propagate they have. They're really good at that. But I put them into a foliar feed program, and I've been making sure that they have good trace mineral nutrition and biology. And the first year or two, I had the Japanese beetles coming in and chewing on them every season, about the same time, about July. And there were a couple of years there where I noticed tremendous pest pressure from them. But since I've gotten the health of those plants up, I don't see them coming in there anymore. And that relates to a point about the difference between plants that we think of as healthy just because they're green and growing, and plants that are truly healthy. Let's go back to that plant health pyramid thing for a moment. Let me just pull this image up here. Here it is. And I'll share this link in the chat here on YouTube so you can check it out yourself visually if you want to. And also share it over here on the Truth Frequency Radio chat. Oh, no, I won't, because Geeky already beat me to it. Thanks, Geeky. Man, you're on top of it. Geeky, if I ever get big, I'm going to pay you as a mod. Well, anyway, so thank you for sharing that. So let's go back to the plant health pyramid for a moment. So when plants have different levels of health, they have different abilities to resist diseases and pests. Let me see if I can zoom in on this enough to actually read this. Why is this not coming through well? All right. Let me open up my local. For some reason, this is not coming up in a quality that I can actually read. I apologize for the wait here while I pull this down. Maybe I can read this now. Yeah. Okay. Pardon me. So there are 4 basic levels. Levels 1, 2, 3, and 4. On level 1, we have complete photosynthesis. On level 2, we have complete protein synthesis. On level 3, we have increased lipid synthesis. And level 4, we have increased plant secondary metabolite synthesis. And so as we go up this plant health pyramid, plants become more resistant to tougher and tougher to beat pests and diseases. So on level 1, we have the volume of photosynthesis increases from anywhere from 150 to 600%, and the carbohydrate profile changes to be composed of a high proportion of complex carbohydrates with low levels of non-reducing sugars in the plant sap. Plants develop resistance to soil-borne fungal pathogens such as verticillium, fusarium, rhizoctonia, pythium, phytophthora, Phytophthora, and others. Plants require adequate levels of magnesium, iron, manganese, nitrogen, and phosphorus to reach this stage of health. Phosphorus is not directly involved in photosynthesis, but it is needed for photosynthate metabolism with increased sugar production. And that leads us back to the plant health pyramid. The biochemical sequence of nutrition in plants. If you're not familiar with that, please do go check to my channel and check that out. I talk about that, and there's also infographics on the internet all over the place. The biochemical sequence of nutrition in plants. And so basically, if you don't have all those base minerals, any one of those pieces of the chain that's missing, now you can't complete the process. And so phosphorus is one of those. So if we get plant health up a little higher and we reach the second level, where we start doing complete protein synthesis, this is where the magic starts to happen. The plant begins converting all the soluble nitrogen compounds to amino acids and complete proteins, so that 100% of all the nitrogen in the plant is converted to complete protein in every 24-hour photocycle. The result is that there are no nitrates and no ammonium remaining in the plant sap every 24-hour photo period. And so plants become resistant to insects with simple digestive systems, especially larval and sucking insects such as tomato hornworms, cabbage loopers, corn borers, corn earworms, aphids, leafhoppers, whiteflies, and thrips. And plants require adequate levels of magnesium, sulfur, molybdenum, and boron to reach this stage of health. Again, boron is not directly related in protein synthesis, but it contributes additional pest resistance. Okay, that's level 2 of the plant health pyramid. Now, if we work our way up and we keep working with the plants and the soil and we get the health up higher, and we reach level 3, we have increased lipid synthesis. This is where plants begin absorbing the majority of their nutrition in the form of microbial metabolites, which are extremely energy efficient, and they begin storing surplus energy in the form of lipids. Plants develop increased resistance to all the airborne fungal and bacterial pathogens, such as downy mildew, powdery mildew, late blight, fire blight, rust, bacterial speck, bacterial spot, which land on the leaf surface and release peptolytic enzymes. Basically, they break down the shell, what's on the leaf surface of the plant. Because of the waxes and oils on the leaf surface, serve as a shield to prevent the enzyme in those from working, right? So these plants actually are developing so much extra complete protein synthesis that now they're able to produce extra lipids. They're able to cover their leaf surface with that, and that protects them from these infections. So plants require a very aggressive plant microbiome in the rhizosphere, that's the root zone, to begin absorbing the majority of their nutrition in the form of microbial metabolites to reach this stage of health. And that goes right back to before when I said inoculants. That biology is critically important for plant health. Alright, so say we get to level 4. We just came through level 3. We're producing increased lipid synthesis. We've knocked out a bunch of different pests and diseases from attacking these plants. Now say we get to level 4. The plant's immune pathways, SAR and ISR, that's ISR is induced systemic response, and SAR is systemic acquired resistance in the plant's microbiome. So the plant's immune pathways are triggered by microbes in the plant's microbiome, both in the rhizosphere and the phyllosphere, or by other immune triggers, resulting in increased concentrations of immune compounds and plant secondary metabolites. Plants develop increased resistance to the entire beetle family, including Japanese beetles, corn rootworm beetles, squash bugs, Colorado potato beetles, cucumber beetles, marmorated stink bugs, nematodes such as root rot nematodes, and viruses. Plants require the correct microbes in the plant microbiome to trigger the immune response to reach this stage of health. Okay, so that's what we're talking about here. Basically accelerating plant health so much that the plants are able to defend themselves. And I haven't been watching the chat while I've been reading this because I've been trying to just make sure that I can get through these points clearly. So let me see if I've missed any questions. Have I missed any questions in here? Anybody? I don't think I have here. No, it doesn't look like it. And let me just have a look at the time here, and also take a look in the TFR chat. Make sure I haven't missed anybody over here. Oh, Free Energy 13's in here in the chat in TFR. Thanks, Free Energy, for coming in. He says, I used to have a soil test kit like this. Includes aluminum test. According to the booklet, any aluminum whatsoever is bad. Yeah, I mean, aluminum's not good in the soil. It's actually a very reactive element. In fact, aluminum, when they make aluminum products, as soon as they come out into the air, it doesn't take very long for that aluminum to actually get aluminum oxide coating on it. And if you were able to keep that off, that aluminum would keep breaking down. So it's a very reactive element. You don't want to see that in your soil tests. Unfortunately, we're seeing a tremendous amount of aluminum showing up in some soil tests all across the country. And I don't want to drill too far down into that at the moment, because that's sort of a touchy subject, and we're streaming here on YouTube as well. Don't want to offend anyone, if you know what I mean. But yes, the aluminum is an issue, but the bigger thing is if you can get your that microbiology going and get your soil health up and your plant health up, they're not going to absorb or use that aluminum, because the soil health is basically going to like sort of eliminate that from being used in the system. That's sort of the short explanation of it. It's obviously a lot more complex scientifically. Let's see. And I see the Farmacy Seeds Network coming up in chat here again, so let me just look. Yep, add the Farmacy Seeds Network. Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, looks like some just a little social network connect going on over here in the chat. So that's awesome. Fantastic. Glad you have the interest, Real Dill and Aaron. Big Rob, good night. Hope you're feeling better and healing up, man. We're thinking about you and praying for you. Hey, Justin Goodearth just came in. Welcome, Justin. Glad to see you in here. Let's see. So I was talking about foliar feeds, and I told you basically what it is. And my next question on here to sort of iterate was, how does it work? And I guess I sort of explained that as well. And what it does, basically you're addressing trace mineral deficiencies or even macro mineral deficiency in the plant much more rapidly than we can do so through soil. And then we come down to the question of what should I feed and when. Well, that goes back to what is the problem with the plants that you're growing. And let me just take a look and see how close we are to the break here. Looks like we're only about 2 minutes out. So I think we'll touch on that when we come back, because that's sort of a complex answer. Even though the concepts are simple, the answer is a little more complex so that you can understand the concepts. So we'll come back to that momentarily. I just want to say thank you to everybody who's here in chat. And that's Aaron Heisner, Big Rob, Bomber, D. Swigger, Geeky Gardens, Justin Goodearth, Miss Real Dill. And since we have just a few moments here before we go back, I just want to say that Geeky Gardens and Justin Goodearth both have YouTube channels, and they have a really cool channels. Geeky Gardens is he's a gardener in Central Florida. He does all kinds of awesome gardening videos, and actually recently he's got a mama cat and baby kitten saga going that is just awesome, and I haven't even had a chance to catch up on it, but I caught a few videos early on in this series here, and it's really cool to watch. And then Justin Goodearth is my good friend out in Oregon. He's a medicinal cannabis grower, and he has a really awesome channel as well, so I hope you'll go check those out. They're excellent channels and excellent people. And it looks like we're not too far from the break here, so I think we're just going to get ready for that, and we'll catch you on the other side of the break, and we'll talk about foliar feeds, how to apply them, what to do, why, and I'll try to answer more of your questions there, Aaron. And I hope I'm being clear and concise enough for your questions. If I haven't answered your question thoroughly, please don't be afraid to ask me for more info. All right, here we go.
So why would I want to buy one of these, Mr. Radio Shack Manager?
Why'd you
How about now? Can you hear me now? Ah, yes. You did see that. Okay, good, Justin. Should be back now. Still muted? I gotta get this Skype connection straightened out. Okay, I see we got the OK sign. Thanks, Bomber. Appreciate it. Thanks for the good feedback. So CBD. I have just a CBD drink here. They did legalize that in New York, but of course, you're not allowed to grow your own medicine. You have to buy it from someone who can commercialize it, and they can tax it. Whoops, did I say that? I'm sorry. Oh, that's right. I'm on Truth Frequency Radio. You're just protection from deception. Anyway, let's see. I'm going to get back to foliar feeds here. Repeat all, please. I was just talking about the idea of a plant being illegal is absolutely ridiculous. If you made tomatoes illegal, everyone would ignore it. And, so there's that. Anyway, I want to get back to foliar feeds here. I just want to finish up this last bit on foliar feeds. And so the question I had before was like, how would I use it? What sort of stuff would I blend? And that sort of thing. All right. So, for example, the best way to do this is to do soil testing and do plant sap analysis. Now, if you're on a small scale, soil testing is affordable. Plant sap analysis is probably not. I'm on a homestead scale here, and I do sell some produce to local restaurants, or at least I did until this whole cough thing came along. But even on my scale, it really doesn't make sense for me to do plant sap analysis, except that I'm also trying to educate myself and dial my plants in on a much better level. And the most powerful tool for doing that is plant sap analysis, and that's because we're taking the most scientific method of approach that we can take to determine exactly what the deficiencies are in plants, basically in real time, and then we can adjust our foliar feeds and our soil amendments to correct for those deficiencies. So last year I did a plant sap analysis test on my crimson beefsteak tomatoes. I sent that test into Advancing Eco Agriculture, and they send that to Nova Crop Labs in the Netherlands. And what they do is they take a new leaf plant, a sample from new leaves on the plant and a sample from 2-week-old leaves on the plant, and they do sap analysis of both of those, and then they compare them, and then you can determine what the deficiencies are up to date, and you can see where the plant was 2 weeks ago. And so using this plant sap analysis method, we can actually predict deficiencies that would show up visually and start to show a loss in plant health up to 3 weeks before you would ever be able to detect those visually. So by the time those deficiencies actually show up on the plant 3 weeks later, it's too late. Well, it's not too late, but you've already had a plant health crash, and in that crash you've lost an opportunity to gain. And I guess I should just pause for a moment and tie this into CPI, or critical points of influence. Critical points of influence is basically the concept that the earliest you can affect a plant's health nutritionally in its life, the better off that plant can express its genetics in the environment that it's growing in. And the better it can express its genetics, the better it can produce, yield, resist disease and pests and all that sort of thing. And that goes back to that plant health pyramid also. Again, biology is the trump card in this whole thing. If you get the biology going right, everything else really comes together. And in fact, my friend Justin Goodearth, we've tentatively talked about having him on as a guest as well. I know he's using a lot of Korean natural farming methods and comfrey tea, I'm sorry, not comfrey tea specifically, but compost tea is what I'm trying to say, methods. And he's found that those are really, really powerful tools on his growing operation there. And I see he has a comment here. PSA and soil testing is spendy here in Oregon and takes forever. Okay, yeah, I know. I'm pretty sure Advancing Eco Agriculture uses. They use Logan Labs for it, and I think the test is like $35. It's not too bad to do, and that's basically, I think that's just a basic soil assay test. And I haven't even done that here. I do need to get back and do that, just so I have a kind of a baseline. But I've sort of established that through the plant sap analysis, knowing that that's an even more effective tool. Anyway, I've managed to put that. I managed to use that this year to get the correct minerals. I actually did a video on plant sap analysis and what my deficiencies were in the crimson beefsteak tomatoes and how I was going to amend them. And this year I'm actually amending them. I'm addressing those through foliar feeds and biology as per previous information and discussion, I guess we'll say. And just want to make sure I didn't miss any questions here or comments that are pertinent to the conversation here. Two back surgeries, fusion. Oh, Aaron. Apparently, Aaron has been through some pretty intense surgery, and he's using cannabis and CBD to help manage his pain, as well he should be. And he's talking about how everybody wants to put you on oxys or some other synthetic compound, basically, which just doesn't have the same. So Justin Good Earth says compost tea and fermented plant juice are easy inputs to make at my home from organic material that naturally grows in your area. Yes, and that is an excellent and powerful tool. And I've used some of those in the past, and I want to get back to it and continue to improve those processes. And I'm really looking forward to our discussion about that in the future, Justin, because I think I can learn a tremendous amount from you, and that's exciting for me. So back to the foliar feed. So, for example, my baseline last year, I was using forage foliar feed and Sea Shield and C-Stim and Micropack, and let's see what else. And also Hollow K and PHT calcium. Okay, so what are those products? Sea Shield is a crab shell and salmon product, so it has some nitrogen in it, some calcium, a good deal of trace minerals, sort of like the Indians putting the fish under their corn and growing plants to fertilize them, sort of like that, but a foliar feed version of that. Forage foliar feed is more specifically designed. It's actually a combination of several products, but it's designed basically to address forage crops like corn, buckwheat, alfalfa, timothy grass. If you're growing for forage for cattle, or if you're growing grains like corn or buckwheat or wheat, or those sort of things, it's formulated specifically to improve the health and vigor and vitality of those plants. And I use that on my corn here and on a lot of my cover crops. I use that as sort of a baseline. It's got good amount of phosphorus in it. It's got a good amount of cold deep seawater seaweed. It's got the trace mineral range of copper, manganese, zinc, boron, molybdenum. All of those they're not completely totally miniature trace minerals, but they're like the higher quantity needed trace minerals, I guess I should say. And let's see what else. The other one in there was Hollow K. That's basically a available but not soluble form of potassium. That's excellent for filling fruit on tomatoes. And let's see, the Rebound Calcium obviously is a calcium product. That's the cell walls of every plant need a tremendous amount of calcium to build strong cell walls. It's sort of like you're building a concrete foundation. If you don't have enough calcium and you have to substitute potassium or some other element in there to make those cell walls, then you end up with weaker cell walls. So it's like the difference between pouring concrete and pouring like mud in as your foundation from a cellular standpoint. So that's sort of an example of that. And then so after I did the plant sap analysis test last year, what I came up with is that I was low in copper, manganese, zinc, and boron. So I picked up the Rebound line of those products. They're available and chelated in the right form to be easily absorbed by the plant and used by the plant. And those are foliar fed on. So I kept my baseline and I added those, and so now we're basically correcting those trace mineral deficiencies that showed up in the plant sap analysis test last year. And ordinarily, if I were a commercial farmer, I would do plant sap analysis every 2 weeks on that crop, and then I would know exactly where that crop was at health-wise and be able to correct for any deficiencies before they started to have a real negative effect on the plant and the plant system. So I don't know, does that answer your question to any degree, Aaron? Let's see, and welcome Gemini. Good to see you in here. Brad, you made it in. And I'm going to go over here and check the TFR chat. Justin's in TFR as well. Woot woot! What's up, Justin? And let's see, I missed some comments here from Free Energy 13. I'm sorry. Let's see. He says, Gomar. Let me move this out of the way. Gomar Fertilizer developed a boron balanced micronutrient blend with DL Farms in Florida that eliminated tomato black spots from bug bites. Yes. Hand grenading tomatoes in the field for the test was a lot of work. Yeah, the boron, actually you can use borax if you really want to use boron, but you have to understand that borax is not it's not basically the pure boron product. So I think it's like 20% boron. So in your calculations, you basically have to take powdered borax and make the chemical calculations that bring you over to the right amount of borax, the right amount of boron. Because if you don't do that and you go excess boron, you can kill plants very quickly, especially in a drought period when plants are dry. They're very susceptible to it. So you don't want to go overboard with that. But yeah, there's definitely other sources. Again, I'm not trying to be here promoting a product from advancing eco agriculture. I just have used their products, and they've provided a tremendous amount of excellent information. And I use them as a consultant for my operation here, and they've been really beneficial and helpful for everything. And I'm more than happy to spend a very small amount of money to get some products that I can target specifically what I need to go after. And yes, Justin Goodearth also made an excellent point about the boron. You can also harm your beneficial insects and predators, and that's true. It's in fact it's a great way to wipe out Colorado potato bug if you use it in the right combination. If you have pretty healthy potato plants and you get a big Colorado potato bug infestation, you can use a combination of boron and a sugar like molasses, or like a sugar humate product like Rejuvenate from AEA. And if you combine those together, basically the Colorado potato bug will eat the plant, continue eating the plant material, take on too much boron. It messes up their ratio of their digestive tract basically, and instead of digesting that plant material, they end up fermenting, and they've actually had them exploding in the field about 24 hours later. I tried to do that 2 or 3 years ago, but my plants were already crashing too far, and I ended up killing the plants because of excess boron. So I certainly speak from experience about that. And I also see a comment here from D. Swigger about boron and trace amounts is good for people every day. Yes, that's true. And my understanding is most people in our Western society are deficient in boron to some degree. So that's another powerful tool. And again, if you're not familiar with boron, go back to the biochemical sequence of nutrition in plants. Go check my videos on that out, and look into that, because it's very critically important. Very important. And in fact, what I'll do here, if you're watching on YouTube, I think I still have the biochemical sequence here in my yeah. So what we'll do is make it so you can see that, just so you can have an idea of how that works, how that process works. Just make sure this video feed comes over, because OBS has been glitchy. There you go. So you can see how the biochemical sequence of nutrition works in plants, and how that is so critical. How you have to have like boron, which activates silica, which carries calcium. This whole chain of events has to happen, and if any one piece of that chain is missing, then that can't happen, and so now you can't support photosynthesis, and so now you have plants that are deficient in energy. So now they can't feed the microbes, they can't grow, they can't do their job, what they do. So looks like they're passing around the maple syrup jug in here now too. Yes, and Justice said that works for sugar ants too. Yes, that's true. Yeah, in fact, you can mix borax and sugar and make it available to ant colonies, and they'll take it back because it's sweet, and that excess boron will actually kill them. But as he said before, you have to be careful, because you can hurt beneficial insects and pollinators, and in fact you can kill honeybees doing that too. So you want to be careful not to go too far, or not to do it at the wrong time of day. One thing you could do is do I do my foliar feeds in the evening, and that way the plants have all night to absorb that trace mineral nutrition, or whatever type of nutrition you're putting on them, and that gives them a chance to absorb it, and then when the sun comes up the following day, they can take all that nutrition that they've absorbed and sort of explode into growth again. There's one other point I wanted to make about that, and I'm trying to think what it was now. Borax. Borax and jam. Yeah. I never tried that, but that would work too. Yeah, anything sweet that you mix it with, they'll take it back to the nest. Justin Goodearth asks, I would love to have this discussion with you because I am somewhat ignorant of boron and its uses as far as plant nutrient or beneficial. Where do you find it naturally? That's an excellent question, Justin. Naturally, as far as like where they mine it, I know one of the first mines was out in California, and it's actually mined. It's a rock, basically a rock. It's in rock mineral. Naturally, in biological processes, it's pretty much everywhere. In fact, I know you were asking about getting some nettle seeds. You were envious of my nettle plants here. Nettles are a plant that's pretty high in boron. So that's another great tool tying back into your compost teas and that sort of stuff. I can't say I can specifically cite other places it's available in the environment. My study on boron is not as good as I would like it to be, but certainly you're bringing my mind back to it, and I'll definitely go back and do some more research on it. And I definitely look forward to having a discussion with you. I'd love to hear from you about your whole process for nutrients and plant health there. I know you're not really buying any external nutrient sources, and I think that's awesome. As much as these foliar feeds are powerful tools, at the end of the day, what we're really trying to do is get our soil health up. And one of the fastest ways we can do that is by improving the photosynthesis of the plant. and sequestering more carbon and feeding those microbial communities. But really what we're trying to do is close the loop ultimately and not have to use foliar feeds because we've gotten our soil health and our plant health up so high that it's no longer necessary. And Geeky Garden says, we always had bottle caps of borax around the house. Hard to find bottle caps now. Oh yeah, all container technology in general has changed dramatically, even in the past like 10 or 15 years. Oh yeah, Bomber says, put it in places where pets won't get to it. Yeah, that's true. That's like, I think the little ant traps that you can buy, those little ant trap tins, I think those are just borax and sugar inside, and they basically just put it in a tin that only ants can get into. So yeah. Up for farm, awesome. Well, I'm glad you're sticking around, Miss Real Deal. Bomber says, I've never done it, but when I worked at the hardware store, I always look for natural alternatives to customer issues so they wouldn't have to buy chemical stuff. I'm sure my boss didn't appreciate it. Yeah, that's funny, Bomber. I'm always trying to turn people away from the chemicals too, because they don't really realize just how negative they actually are to them and to the environment and downstream, through the environment, and how ubiquitous they are in the environment. For example, they did a study where they did rainwater samples all over the place. Some of these samples were in very remote places, and they actually found trace amounts of Roundup or glyphosate in those rainwater samples. So we do have a toxin problem in our environments, and I'm not going to go on to a long lecture about that. If you want to hear about that, I think I talked about that in one of the other episodes, and I know I've talked about that in other live streams, and also I know we talked about that in great detail on the Paranormal Portal podcast, Health and Spirituality with Carlton Moore, the Paranormal Portal with Brent Thomas. So that's an interesting thing you can go check out. We also talked about water and spirituality, not just spirituality, but many of the very eccentric properties of water, shall we say. And I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about water as we go on through episode to episode here on Comrades and Farms. And I think we're coming up on the end of the show here pretty soon. Yeah, we've only got about a minute left here. So I just want to say thank you to Truth Frequency Radio for having me on as a host here. I'm very excited to have a new venue to participate in and a new group of people to talk to and connect with. I want to say thank you to everyone who came in here to YouTube chat and who's listening on Truth Frequency Radio. I'm really excited that you guys are interested in this, that you come in and support my channel and come in to talk about all these exciting and wonderful things. And I can't believe 2 hours has gone by already. It always goes by so fast. Let's see, what else? You can catch me on Instagram as Reboot Agriculture. I have a few videos and photos up there. You can find me on YouTube, The Farmacy Seeds Network. That's Farmacy, as in Let Food Be Thy Medicine. Where else can you find me? You can find me on MeWe as the Farmacy Seeds Network. It's MeWe.com. And I think that's basically the end of the show. There's the music coming in. Thank you, everyone. Thanks to Truth Frequency Radio. Thanks to all my friends and family who supported me here. We'll see you guys next time on Comrades and Farms.